But it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Cleveland Browns, and that's why I'm excited to bring on from SB Nation. We have Jared Mueller hanging out and giving us some time today. Jared, it's been a while, sir. How are you? Welcome.
Oh, I'm doing well, man. Just coming back from the marathon of sprints that Indianapolis is every year for the combine.
Yeah, you do have that. I mean, you are kind of winding down, coming back from that, but coming back from that, I mean, there's so many takeaways for Cleveland. I talked about the Bengals a little bit ago. Going to be a little bit of a quieter offseason for them. Their main focus, of course, is going to be, trying to keep as many of their current weapons on that roster and just restructure some things and kind of plan ahead. But they don't have to do a lot because they have a roster that was, well, for the last 2 years, a play away from winning a Super Bowl and a play away from getting back to one. The Cleveland Browns, although minus, and they're in the negative as far as cap right now, a lot of restructures are going to be on the table, which means they're going to have a lot of money to spend, which made them very active. Andrew Berry, of course, very active at the combine, which of course you followed. I'm going to let you kind of take it from here, but your biggest takeaway from the conversations you had about the Browns and Andrew Berry during this free agency period coming up, aggressive seems to be the biggest takeaway about the Browns' approach to this upcoming free agency period.
Yeah, and I think aggressive has been Andrew Berry's kind of what he does since he's been in Cleveland. He's signed some of the top players in free agency every year so far. Now, not all of those have worked out. Austin Hooper, John Johnson III is about to be released, but all the conversations I have is that Andrew Berry is creative, and at some level he's kind of like us when it comes to fantasy football. He just wants to make moves. Now, obviously, he's not just making moves to make moves, but he's a guy who is consistently talking to teams and sometimes maybe bugging teams, but he wants to get things done. And with agents know he's going to be a straight shooter. And so kind of opposite of what you talked about with Cincinnati, where they have $40 million in cap space, but are going to let PFF's number 4 free agent basically walk out of the door. Cincinnati, even when they were with Carson Palmer and Andy Dalton, often kind of treadmill talent. They drafted really well, but some of that talent was slipping away. What we kind of know about Andrew Berry is he is going to add talent upon talent upon talent. If it works, it works until he gets to the point that whether it's 5 years down the road, 6, 7, 8, that maybe he has to kind of do a tear down, but he's really not a kind of general manager that's going to idle. So you're going to see moves, whether it's, trading a pick this year for a defensive lineman and a pick next year, or he is going to go after Jesse Bates, Jason Hargrave, Brandon Graham, some of those guys from Philadelphia, a free safety, maybe not so much spend in the wide receiver position, but he's not a general manager that's going to stand still. You're not going to see a lot of off seasons where this roster looks the same as it did the year before.
What's the Haslam's approach to this? I mean, what I mean by that is, Andrew Berry strikes me as a guy that is kind of, I mean, if they fail this year, I mean, I don't know what his future in Cleveland looks like if it doesn't work out, whatever moves are made this upcoming. Are they a very hands-on ownership group? Are they having a lot of say? I mean, some say there was a lot that they kind of forced the Deshaun. I don't know if that's factual or not, but that they kind of forced the hand of management to go get Deshaun Watson. What is their role in this? Is it more Jerry Jones like in Dallas, or is it just throw the cash at them and say, go do your thing? I mean, how much freedom does Andrew Berry actually have as far as his vision for what he wants to do in this offseason, especially an offseason as important as this one, with all the resources that they're going to have to go out and make changes to this roster?
He's really kind of an in-between in that he is going to be very involved in some of those big decisions. He wants his hand in the pot. He wants to understand the vision, the plan, all of that. And then he's just going to give you a ton of money, somehow has enough money to take on a 50% of valuation of the Milwaukee Bucks. So 1 point something billion dollars to pay for a basketball team in another city. So he has the money, but he wants to understand the vision. And that's really the role of Paul DePodesta in that organization, is to really help Jimmy Haslam see that here's the plan, here's the structure, here's what we're seeing. If it doesn't work, here's how we're going to turn the page, those kind of things. But he's really hands-on for those big decisions. Otherwise, and kind of some of the planning, otherwise, it's basically a blank check. It is figure it out. I've got the money. He wants to win. He's super competitive. He may go down some ugly roads sometimes, including the Deshaun Watson stuff, but he is super competitive, wants to win, and is willing to pay whatever it takes to make that happen.
You were just at the combine. What guys are the Browns looking to add in the NFL draft? Obviously, they don't have a lot of first-round picks or any first-round picks for the next 3 or 4 years, but obviously they still have picks in the later rounds. What type of guys or positions are they looking to fill?
So positions is really right around the defensive line. The defensive line right now has one player on it. That they have Myles Garrett. Everything else is up in the air. And so I'm very bad at pronunciation, so I hate that I'm going to pull this off or try to. USC,
Welcome to the club. So am I.
Oh man, brother! I'm really looking right now, trying to find. I've got a pronunciation guide someplace, and I'm going to fail finding it. But USC Tuli Poe to the defensive lineman.
Nailed it.
Played at two. He played at 290 last year as a defensive end. Slimmed down to 263. He had 13 and a half sacks. He's a player who can play in multiple places on the line. Mozzie Smith out of Michigan might fall farther than people think. Very little production, but a lot of upside there. And then Northwestern's guy, I'm not even going to try on that one. Just blew up the combine, was great at the Senior Bowl. He's a player who can play defensive tackle, defensive end. And then there's a wide receiver out of UC. He's a Cleveland guy, Tyler Scott. Passionately wants to play for Cleveland, is an explosive player. He's the kind of guy that while they may not have a immediate need for wide receiver, given Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku, and David Bell, he's the kind of guy that if they need to move up after getting a defensive lineman early in the second round, he might be a player that they're going to move up in the second round to try to get, or early in the third round to get that kind of player who has kind of the quickness that we saw with Kansas City with Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. The Browns really lack that kind of quick player to make impactful plays near the line of scrimmage, which Watson really kind of will benefit from.
Obviously, a lot of holes that they have the resources to fill a lot of these holes, but a lot of holes to fill nonetheless. But you look at Buffalo, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. Obviously, you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and you look at Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. You look at Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, and there's a lot of big 1-2 punches in this league. Deshaun Watson has Amari Cooper, and by the way, Amari Cooper is no scrub, so I am not disrespecting Amari Cooper, but at the same time, Amari Cooper is no Stephon Diggs, no Jamar Chase, no Travis Kelce, so on and so on. I know defense it sounds like with all the rumors coming out of the combine, that defense seems to be the number one focus, but should Browns fans hold out hope for a DeAndre Hopkins or a big name at wide receiver at all, or is that something that you feel like they're confident and what they can go grab in the draft, or just natural improvement through changing the offensive scheme from a more run-centric scheme to a more open scheme like we've read about throughout the offseason?
Yeah, I think the reality is it's about asset management. And so having Amari Cooper on the contract that he is on, David Njoku, Nick Chubb, those are 3 of your 5 offensive weapons that are on the field at any one time. And those 3 are already paid. Donovan Peoples-Jones will be a free agent after this year. And he's a player, 61 receptions, 839 yards, 3 touchdowns. Again, we're not talking about Higgins and Chase, but are we talking about a Boyd-level player where he's going to get an $8-9 million contract? I think at that level, you're just talking about asset allocation. It's just not going to work out. Talk to some agents. They're like, I just don't see how the Browns pull that off with everything else that they need. And in reality, they're paying Deshaun Watson to make these players better. That's what happens when you pay a quarterback, whether it's the guaranteed money, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, doesn't matter. At some point, they're going to have to make cheaper receivers, cheaper tight ends better. And the Browns are looking to really kind of marginally improve with some of those younger guys in the draft, Foster Moreau in free agency at tight end, and then hope that Deshaun Watson is taking Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Bell, David Njoku kind of over the top, because that's what you pay somebody that much money to do.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off since Justin's scared to talk about it. Nick Chubb.
I ain't scared of nothing. I already had that on the run. I had it in all capital letters. I had, never mind. I can't make that joke. But I had Nick Chubb written down right here.
I will be the first to admit, Justin was the first Cleveland Browns fan that I ever heard talk about the possibility of trading Nick Chubb for more draft picks or other players. Is that a real possibility of the Cleveland Browns actually moving off their best player?
Yeah, and Jared, real quick to elaborate on that, if you don't mind. It wasn't just to get additional draft. It was the fact that when you look at teams around the league, every team that has an elite quarterback or that has an elite quarterback that's paid, you can't find a team in the league that has an elite paid quarterback and an elite paid running back. And Dak may be paid a lot, but he ain't freaking elite. So let's just be real. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where people are piling on me mad because they think I don't like Nick Chubb. I'm the biggest Nick Chubb. That's my favorite Cleveland Browns player right now. So I'm taking my fandom out of it. It's one of those where you're talking about having to get the cheaper end receivers to make them better. Well, what I hear is, we got to get cheaper end wide receivers, not because Deshaun's paid a lot, but because you got a 12 to 15 mil a year running back that, as good as he is, I always felt like he was the guy to kind of help bail out a Baker Mayfield or Jacoby Brissett. You don't have to bail out a Deshaun Watson, or at least that's the hope. What is the long term to piggyback off Kev's question? What is the long term outlook for Nick Chubb?
Yeah, so this year I would put it at 99% Nick Chubb is going to be on the Cleveland Browns. Next year it gets really interesting because you're right. The reality is that even when we look at EPA, which is kind of like baseball WAR, Nick Chubb was the best in the NFL at running back and would have been like 35th ranked at wide receiver. So the best running back in the NFL is equal to, and again, obviously this is oversimplified numbers, but equal to the impact at the end of the day of the 35th ranked wide receiver. But right now, when I talk about Andrew Berry being aggressive, he literally is acting as if the NFL salary cap is going up 15 to 20 million every year for the next 3 years. And when you say that he's just going to continue to be aggressive, it is going to be about adding talent. And at times you can rob Peter to pay Paul, right? And so next year, if Chubb has another good year, it's going to be a good year with 12 to 15 carries a game. And they're okay with that because it extends his career and possibly makes him valuable in a trade. But they're not going to make that trade unless, again, it could be on draft night of 2024. But it's going to be very specific. It's going to be very targeted, not, oh, we need more money or we want more draft picks. It's going to be very, very specific in a way to greatly improve the team, both in the short term and the long term. But if Nick Chubb is here throughout the entirety of his contract, that wouldn't shock me, given the way that Andrew Berry has run the team. He extended Kareem Hunt with a top-level backup running back kind of contract. So he has kind of gone away from the general analytics of not paying running backs.
So last question for me about the combine. I got to ask you about the Ohio State guys, Jackson Smith and Jigba. He didn't run the 40, but he destroyed every other drill out there. And CJ Stroud was awesome. So how do they look in person?
Man, in person, I'll tell you this. Lucas Oil Stadium was kind of pointless until we got to quarterback day. And quarterback, you could see, as a Buckeye myself, I'll be paying them, for my master's degree for a while still. You could see why, for me, CJ Stroud is quarterback one. He just is. It's not Bryce Young. It is CJ Stroud. He has everything you want in a quarterback. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to catch everything, his fluid movement. Now, I think the concern for kind of a fan base perspective is JSN going to be that number one wide receiver on the outside who is making the big Jamar Chase plays? Probably not. He may not have that top end speed, which is why he was smart enough to wait for Ohio State's pro day, because that 40 at Ohio State might just be slightly downhill. But he is going to be a hugely impactful player at the next level. And I think from maybe being a high second round pick, he's now pretty much guaranteed himself in that top 20, top 15 range, depending on how a bunch of trades kind of play out. Stroud, I think, makes things really interesting at the top of the draft. Do teams decide I don't need to be as aggressive to get up to number one? Because whether I have Bryce Young 1 or CJ Stroud 2, maybe that's a little bit closer. And then you have the freak athlete of Anthony Richardson, who just showed that he could play every position on the field. The top of the draft has become really, really interesting because CJ Stroud showed everyone what us Buckeyes knew, that he could and should be the top quarterback in this draft.
There's a Michigan fan in the comment section that saying it's Bryce Young. Sorry. So you know Shaw. Shaw. Yeah.
I will say this: if Bryce Young was 6'2", I would pick him first, but he ain't. He's 5'10", and I'm surprised he got all the way up to 205 pounds. Shouts out to Bryce Young for eating a whole bunch of chicken and peanut butter sandwiches to put on that weight.
He was water weight.
Yeah. Like that's that boxer weight. Like he gonna go home and he gonna go back to his normal diet and he's gonna get right back down to 185.
We have Jared Mueller with us here again, SB Nation, Dawgs By Nature again, hanging out with us here, Kinner and Kev live on Dayton's ESPN radio station. Jared, last thing here on the way out, your initial takeaways. What from the Lamar Jackson situation in Baltimore? I know right away we're just assuming he's out in Baltimore, but it does seem kind of wild if they find a way to keep him there or if he's willing to stay there, obviously. But I am curious your thoughts. Let's just assume that he leaves Baltimore. Does that make the Browns more aggressive? Because hey, now we just had it's Browns and Browns and Bengals. I'm disrespecting Kev Steelers, by the way. Browns and Bengals. Or if they keep Lamar, it's okay. Now we got to bulk up because we got Lamar still in this division. Like will it have any impact on the Browns' approach to this offseason?
I don't think it's going to have much impact. I think the area you might see it have a small impact is maybe what they look to do at linebacker or safety, just because of the speed and quickness of Lamar Jackson, the Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah pick, and some of the different things they've done partially were to deal with Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. But if you're good enough, you're going to have to deal with two of the three of those guys anyways. The interesting thing at the Combine was without an agent, the Jackson murmurs were, we don't know what's going to happen. There was just almost everyone to a man was like, they're probably going to tag him. We have no idea who's interested, but so far I've seen qualified reports that say the Falcons are not interested, the Carolina Panthers are not interested, and so you start to wonder: is going home to Miami, staying in the AFC, is Baltimore willing to make that deal? Right out to Las Vegas with Josh McDaniels, is that the guy? Is that who they replaced Derek Carr with?
Jared, real quick, the Raiders. It just came out. The Raiders are not. The Raiders are very unlikely. This is from Dov Kleiman. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but no, that's what I was thinking too. But that one just kind of knocks that one out as well. So you're right. It seems like that at this point, Miami is just becoming more and more of his only option. And do you think that these teams are stepping out because of the guaranteed money thing?
I don't think it's the guaranteed money thing. It is a little bit. Actually, that's a good call on the Raiders. Mark Davis doesn't have the money to escrow, and that goes back to that cash-rich owners. Like when Cincinnati in the Paycor Stadium, that happened so that they had more money to put in escrow for all the guaranteed money they're going to have to give Joe Burrow. And so I think it goes back to where is your ownership group? And so I think a lot of it comes down to the last 2 years he finished the season injured. Baltimore let it be really known that they thought he should be able to play last year in that playoff game. And so Baltimore's kind of muddied the waters in a variety of ways, and it continues with this non-exclusive franchise tag. This could get really, really ugly and really, really complicated this offseason. The Giants just signed Daniel Jones. The Jets might have Aaron Rodgers. All of a sudden, the landing spots for Lamar Jackson, cash-rich owner, and a team who needs a quarterback, you're starting not to see a lot of those out there already. And can he come back to Baltimore on a one-year deal when he wanted $200 and some million guaranteed?
Interesting. Going to be, by the way, do you believe, Jared, that the Ravens are hoping he finds another deal? I know that sounds silly, but is there, because if he doesn't find another deal elsewhere, that means they're back to the drawing board, right? Like, and that could be him sitting out because he doesn't want to play for the 32 mil franchise. I mean, so is that what you mean by this can get really, really ugly if that's the case?
Yeah, it could, exactly that. I think the Ravens actually do. The reason they did the non-exclusive tag is to allow Lamar to go find what his market is. And if that market is palatable to them, then they're going to sign him to that deal. But they didn't, having your quarterback begrudgingly back in the locker room, especially after last year ended, is just not a good feel for a team that wants to compete, especially after that NFLPA survey came out where they got and some of their current and former players are coming out against kind of how they do things in the weight room and with the training staff. They need things to be smooth going into next season. So if they have Lamar on a deal that he signed with somebody else and they match, they have their quarterback at a market price that he knows is real. Otherwise, they have 2 first-round picks and they figure it out from there.
All right, Jared, beyond appreciate your time. Jared Mueller, SB Nation, and of course, covering the Browns for Dawgs By Nature. Jared, you the man. Appreciate you. This won't be the last time we have you on. I promise you that much. Thank you, and we'll talk soon.